Next is Oregon.
My name is John Coplantz. I'm the State Pavement Management Engineer for Oregon DOT. I've brought with me a co-presenter, Tim Earnest, with our pavement section in Salem headquarters. He's our assistant pavement quality engineer. I'll start first, and he'll talk more about the pavement preservation culture. I'm just going to start rambling about some slides I prepared for upper management, and I thought, well, I'll just talk about them today. So a little bit of background for Oregon State Highways. This is our state highway network. Those are our pavement conditions. We're a pretty rural state with a couple of urban centers. Portland's one. You got Eugene, Olympics, Summer Olympics, and track and field. That's a hot spot there. Other than that, Oregon's a pretty sleepy little state. Pavement conditions in general are pretty good. You know, we have our poor ones, don't get me wrong, but a lot of our pavements are in pretty decent shape overall. We have about 18,000 lane miles or so. Most of that's asphalt. Western states are kind of like that. Most of our concretes are on the freeway. We still have some old oil mats out there, and I think Washington calls them BST roads, but basically this is the same type of thing. And then we even have some gravel roads in our system. Pavement management stuff, we collect pavement data both with windshield and with automated means. Fugro has a contract with us as well. About 5,000 miles we collect every couple years, and on the interstate we have to collect every year 1,400. And so, at least for pavement management folks like me, it costs a lot of money just to do the data collection to meet the MAP 21. I guess I'm on the soapbox a little bit because it's a lot of money we spend on that, but it's good information, and it's real good to be able to use this information to make better decisions on pavement preservation. So why am I here? Well, this is a lot of data mining that I've done over the last few months, and it's going back in time ever since about 2001, 2002, when I started my career with Oregon DOT. We've been trying to keep good records on how many miles we pave and what it costs us to do a project. So these are what our expenditures are on the top graph, and I've kind of lined up the expenditures, the cost per lane mile, and then I'll show you on the next slide how it's been doing for our pavement lane miles. Basically, most of our money comes from the feds. We appreciate that, you federal highway guys, thank you. We have some state revenues. Most of that was through bond measures back in the early 2000s called the OTIA program. We did get some redistribution in 2009, thanks Obama. And the purple bar there in 09-10 is a pretty big number reflecting that. Maintenance has a small contribution, but it's a very important contribution because of a lot of our pavement preservation work is done in that maintenance bucket, and it is 100% state funds. And then finally, recently, I guess you'd call it the burgundy bars are a new House Bill 2017, which was a major funding package for the state. It brought on some additional pavement revenues as well. A lot of the House Bill money, though, does go to congestion-type projects, and a lot of the focus of that is for that type of work. What's interesting is, if you look at how much we've been spending on dollars per lane mile, you know, of course, our least expensive projects tend to be our single lift type projects, which are the blue ones in the middle chart, followed by your double lifts. And of course, when you're doing a rebuild, a reconstruct, those are pretty costly. So when your mix of fixes things, you're not doing a whole lot of those, hopefully. You're doing mostly pavement preservation and mostly thin paving projects, which is what we do typically. But what we're seeing is on the interstate, which is the middle bars, those actually are over time, they've grown, but they haven't gotten too out of hand. What you'll see on the bottom set of charts, though, we're starting to pay a lot more money to do work in the rural system, in particular in the urban areas. And fortunately and unfortunately, the case there is there's just a lot more incidentals that go along with that. Those roads do need preservation, don't get me wrong, but they are very costly. And so the cost per lane mile on those have ramped up significantly. So the next thing I did, the top graph is the same graph I had on the previous one, but what I did was I lined this up with how many lane miles we've been treating. Kind of looked at what pavement conditions have been historically. Because data and knowledge is power, right? You know, if you've been watching pavements for 20 years and tracking them, And most pavement lasts about 20 years. You've basically gone through a full cycle on a lot of your pavements. So you have a pretty good idea about how long they live. If you have good information about what they cost, it's great information. And to me, it's all about the miles. At the end of the day, it's all about the miles. I love what Jeff said about in New Mexico. They actually have a legislative lane mile target. That's a good one. I need to work on that one, because all we have right now is fare better. And I think what we're seeing is, if you look at the bottom set of graphs, we've done very well in what we call our fare better measure over time. It's stayed pretty constant. In fact, it's better than ever. What's happening is we're laying off the miles, the lane miles. And what's going to happen is our goods are going to go down. Our fare betters will lag behind that. It's initially going to be the goods. We tried to get a percent good measure into our legislative thing this session. Our management doesn't want to add anything right now, so we're not going to really do that. But what I'm trying to do with these things is we've had a whole shift in the management of the DOT. Big shifts. A lot of the folks that were around when we were really keeping our eye on the ball in paving have since retired or gone away. We have this new legislative package for this House bill that is our front and center. Everybody's attention is on that. And unfortunately, a lot of the attention about maintaining the assets is kind of slipped off to the side. And it's my job, so sharing the culture, it's my job to get that message back to our upper management folks. And it's work like this that helps get that message across. But sadly, we, even though we have, this new money in the top set of graphs, the far right, we got this new money. In the end of the day, we're spending about the same amount of money we always have, and we all know that the cost of oil, the cost of everything is more, and our budget has been basically flat for 20 years. If you look at how many miles historically we've been able to pave and chip, we've been doing really well with a paving cycle time of 25 years. We design them for 15 when we do rehabs, and yet we're doing a paving cycle time of 25 years, and we're getting away with it. With the projects we got in the hopper between 2019 and 2024, we're looking at a 52-year cycle time. If you work out how many miles we're doing, that's not sustainable. And it's my job to just keep beating that drum. We are looking at ways to try to make it less expensive in the project delivery process and get back to some projects that are more focused on pave only, and that's all we're doing, and simplified project teams and simplified project delivery, because a lot of that, I think, does drive some of these costs. Anyway, this is the consequences when you have roads that are in fair condition. They're not good, they're not bad, but unfortunately, they get in this category in fair, and if they're fair or better, a legislator thinks, oh, it's in good shape. Well, they can go very rapidly. I would like to be able to keep up with it. The miles are very important. And this is the consequence when we don't keep up with our miles. We'll get a sudden shift. And it may take that to get the message across. We'll see. I'm going to be around for about another 10 years. We'll see how it goes.
So as John said, I'm Tim Earnest, the Assistant Pavement Quality Engineer for Oregon. And I'm briefly going to talk about some of the typical treatments that ODOT uses for our preservation, and then some of the not so common ones that we've implemented in the last couple years. Also going to talk about our preservation culture and also the knowledge transfer. So for Oregon's typical treatments, it's basically that typical. There's not a lot that I see different than what a lot of states are doing. For asphalt surfaces, we're doing chip seals, mostly emulsion based, polymer modified. We do have the occasional hot applied with a pre-coated aggregate. Fog seals, we're typically doing those on either our rumble strip installations, our chip seals, or our what we have left of our open graded friction courses. Crack sealing, and then single lift inlays and overlays. Concrete surfaces, full depth, partial depth repairs. We're also doing diamond grinds. Not so typical, but we do have a pretty big project where we're going to be doing a significant amount of center line miles. And then the 2-inch sacrificial ACP overlay. As it was said before, we've We got a lot of studded wear tire in Oregon for about 6 months out of the year. So some of our pavements really take a beating. To keep preservation relevant in Oregon, we look at implementing new treatments. We've had a couple projects the last couple years. We started to use microsurfacing and also asphalt rubber chip seals. And then we're also looking at programming these preservation treatments early. You get these newer treatments out there, get the word out, start talking with the funding managers, get these on the scoping list, and then get these projects going. And then we're also promoting those concepts to the decision makers, basically keeping our good roads in good condition. The most recent microsurfacing project we had was actually on the interstate. It's a rural 9-mile section between Baker City and Idaho. The section was last paved in 2010. It was in good condition before that. It was a black and white section, so we had concrete in the truck lane, asphalt in the passing lane. And this was a good trial for us. There was a little bit of risk at it being on the interstate, but there wasn't such a risk being in an urban setting. So if something did happen to go wrong with either construction or materials, then it wouldn't be as big of an issue. The benefit of this project, though, is that with it being a success, it has opened the door. We do have an upcoming project closer to the western side of the state, where there's a little bit more political influence. Then this year we had our asphalt rubber chip seal project. This was actually on 2 different sections of 2 different highways close to Ontario or the Oregon or the Idaho border. The first section was on Oregon 201, just under 2 centerline miles. Now this was a new alignment that was constructed approximately 16 years ago due to materials or construction issues. It had 41% fatigue cracking at the time that we had placed the chip seal in there. And we knew that going into it, there was maybe a little bit of risk with that much of fatigue cracking, but that's what that treatment is supposedly supposed to help mitigate reflection cracking on that. It was a little bit of urban, but there was a significant amount of truck traffic on there. It's going to be a good test section for us. The second section was more of an urban setting, a little bit better on the condition rating. It was actually a couplet through the town of Vail, 3.34 lane miles. Again, last paved in 2003. The westbound section was actually the old alignment of the highway, so its condition was actually in poor at the time of treatment. Again, 43% fatigue cracking, a good candidate for the treatment itself. Yeah, low severity fatigue cracking. And both these projects went really well for us. The way the bid numbers kind of came in, it isn't something that Oregon's really jumping at the bit to use on a lot of projects, but it was a success for us and something that, another tool for the toolbox. As John said, we've lost in the last couple of years a lot of our knowledge and experience base, and in the next 5 years or so, we stand to lose quite a bit more to retirement. So a big thing for us is involving the next generation of engineers, technical minds, in the preservation process and the decision making. So we'll include our engineers in the early scoping and design phases, funding decisions, and then also on our maintenance side, like where we do a lot of our chip seals, you know, that knowledge is being passed down through the generations to the teams. I'd say probably 20 years ago, we had maybe 1 good crew in the whole state that did a lot of chip seals. Then the team's kind of broken apart across the state, and they've got their own crews now, and so we're spreading that information out there. Any questions?
Question for John Coplantz. On your comment regarding the ODOT leadership and trying to get a preservation philosophy ingrained in their way of thinking, I mean, I'm with you 100%. Part of the challenge seems to be Oregon passes a gas tax increase to better preserve our highways, but then mandates a bunch of super expensive jobs in the bill that takes away from pavement preservation. I don't see a way around that until those jobs are done.
Yeah, I believe you're right, John. You know, the other thing is, what I've been told is that we're going to expect that gas tax will rise over time, or at least, and there's indexes about every couple, 3 years, I think they go up. So in theory, we will see more money for finally the infrastructure, the preservation piece of the infrastructure. I think I'll believe it when I see it, though. I'm starting to be a little cautiously optimistic, because I thought initially, because we actually, in my graphs, you'll see that we put a lot into the program back in 2018. And I expected, when we were selecting projects for the next step that would continue, and it did not. And I think that part of the reason is what you're talking about. The agency is very focused on making sure that we deliver those named projects in the bill first. And I'm hopeful, but I don't want to wait. You know, I see it now, and I'm like, what can we do about this? So I'm with you there.
Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.